Welcome back to This Week. Time now to get our views of our national political and media experts, Nashville Democratic State Representative Brenda Gilmore and syndicated conservative talk show host Steve Gill. Welcome, guys. I think health care reform is going to be the topic. It has been the topic all week long in Washington and here in Nashville. It's what's like watching sausage being made, isn't it? But it's really the American way, and it has gotten people engaged, both sides.
Yeah, and frankly, I got to say that one of the interesting things about this is whether you go to the grocery store, whether you go hang out in a park or something, people are talking about it. I mean, and this is policy wonk stuff they're getting into. They're getting into, well, you know, page 425 of the bill says this. So I think in terms of engaging people, it's been great. I think the key is we've got to get past where a lot of the media has been focused on the anger at town hall meetings and get down to whether this anger's justified. And when you've got members of Congress answering their cell phones and ignoring people during town hall meetings, flat out lying to them, saying, I haven't read the bill, I have no intentions of reading the bill, it is that arrogance that is fueling the anger, not necessarily some of the details of the bill.
I'm glad that we're getting past the anger. That part certainly disturbed me. The debate, I think, is certainly the American way, and I'm glad that we're doing that. But the anger, bringing guns to some of the town hall meetings, I think that that's really a shame, because those people who honestly want to hear what this whole debate is about, then I think that hinders them from accomplishing that goal.
There was a pro-health care rally here in Nashville this week at Centennial Park, and of course some of the anti-folks showed up. There was some discussion, there were some loud voices, but it was civil, and people were talking to each other anyway, exchanging views. It may have gotten a little loud, but this is really what we want, isn't it?
I think the danger, though, is that you are seeing, certainly the Obama administration, ratchet up the call to violence. I mean, they've dispatched union goons and thugs to rallies with the admonition from the White House to punch back, to get in people's faces. We saw in the rally the pro-Obamacare people yelling, no health care, no peace. And I think that like Brenda, I'm concerned that this thing could get violent. What I'm concerned about is that the administration is calling for violence, and it's been dished out. We've seen people get beat up at these rallies ever since the Obama administration called upon their folks to go out and punch back.
Yeah, I don't think that's fair. I don't think that the administration nor the president condones this violence. In fact, I think his last town hall meeting was very calm, and I think that sent a message to all the legislators to do everything that they could to keep everything calm. Some of the talk show hosts, I think, are probably igniting and creating an atmosphere for this violence, and we've really got to move away from that. We just don't want anything violent to happen or to have a black mark on these discussions. Again, discussing it is the American way, but there's no place at all for violence. In fact, it gets in the way of us learning what the real issues are. And I think some of our distractors want us to do that, too.
I don't think the guy who was using the bullhorn shouting out, no health care, no peace, was a talk show host, but maybe Brenda knows him better than I am.
I don't know him at all.
Especially for rural areas, for rural taxpayers. Aren't these town hall meetings important, and is there a concern that they become, rather than discussion, just shouting matches, though?
Well, I think absolutely, and I think we ought to be seeing more of what's actually in the bill, and I would encourage people to read it. I don't know if Dr. Coopwood has read the bill. It doesn't matter what Barack Obama says he wants in the health care plan. The White House hasn't distributed. This is our legislative plan. They allowed Congress to take the lead and write the bill. House Resolution 3200, the House resolution, is out there to be read, and most of what President Obama says he wants in a health care reform plan is contradicted by what the Democrats have already passed in committee after committee. So they need to get on the same page if they're going to say this is what we're doing based on what the president says.
I think the president, and even to his fault, is leaving a lot of how this bill is going to be shaped to the legislators. And as a result, we have 4 different bills floating around. And this has caused some misinformation as well as some confusion out there. So I'd like to see us move past the shouting and the bickering and talk about the real issues, and then for us to get one bill before us and begin to negotiate them.
His only parameters that he has spoken publicly about are to keep your choice, so you have your options, and not increase the deficit. Beyond that, he hasn't gotten into specifics, as Steve said. And I guess the real question is this a health care reform bill, or is this going to be an insurance industry reform bill? Because the big issue seems to be if Congress can get through Congress and voted on elimination of the pre-existing condition status. If that happens, that is huge for people being covered for health care.
Yeah, and I think we also have to get the message out to people that when we look at that 1 in 3 Americans under 65 years old do not have any insurance at all. And if we don't do anything, even those of us who have insurance probably will not be able to afford insurance in 10 years. So we've really got to get that message out. Not to do anything is really not an option. We must have some type of insurance reform, and we've got to get that message out to people. And I'm not sure that that's really getting out, because I see even middle-class Americans are protesting, and for that reason I think some of those distractors or people who don't want insurance reform to happen are entering into the discussion.
I would agree that we need to make sure that we're actually reforming the system, and nobody that I'm aware of is calling for nothing to be done. Again, the Republicans have also put up a health care reform bill that would deal with tort reform. About 10% of the cost we pay in health care is because of the duplicative test that Dr. Coopwood was talking about, a lot of it fueled by the fact that a hospital's got to perform the same test again because they're going to get sued by some lawyer if they don't do their own test. Tort reform would help bring about 10% of the total cost. That is not a part of the discussion coming from the Democrats. We ought to be able to go across state lines. We ought to be able to have bigger insurance pools. We ought to be able to make sure the consumer is back in the system. And I think we can do most of this by subsidizing people's acquisition of health insurance rather than making it free, rather than creating a free system that's going to bring us what they have in Canada and England that is simply not working.
As you said, it seems to be agreement that something has to be done. Both sides of the aisle agree on that. I guess the question is now, with the rhetoric ratcheted up, is everybody going to calm down enough that something comes out of a House, Senate voted compromise bill that goes to the president?
Well, the problem is also you've got the special interest playing. I mean, the Democrats are so wedded to the trial lawyers, they won't allow tort reform. The Republicans, for the most part, have been so wedded to the pharmaceutical industry, they won't allow a reduction in the cost that we're paying. The pharmaceutical industry makes more from profits in America in drug sales than they do from the rest of the world combined. That ought to be on the table. Tort reform ought to be on the table. And reasonable people ought to be able to reform a system that lowers cost, expands the quality of care, which is what we ought to be more interested in. And that, unfortunately, is not happening because politics is playing too big a role.
And we can't expect, I don't think we can expect the insurance and the special interest groups to help this reform to occur, because we've been talking about it for years and it just has not occurred. And when we look at the CEOs of these big companies, they're making millions of dollars in bonuses. The big four insurance companies, I think, have increased their profits up to 400%. So we can't expect that. You know, I think if we can all get behind our legislators and administration and support them, stop bickering, then we can get something that's going to benefit everyone.
Brenda, Gilmore, Steve Gill, appreciate your insight. Stay with us. This Week continues in a moment.